The dust swirled across the barren road as Madeline Vance ran for her life, her wedding dress torn and mudded, her breath coming in desperate gasps. Behind her, the thunder of hooves grew louder, the shouts of her pursuers carrying on the hot summer wind. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman alone, but anything was better than the fate that awaited her back at the altar. There she is, the gravelly voice of her Uncle Pierce cut through the air. Corner her by the ravine. Madeline's heart hammered in her chest as she veered off the main trail, stumbling down a rocky embankment toward a small cluster of cottonwoods. Her uncle had promised her hand to Silas Thornton, a man 40 years her senior with a reputation for cruelty that stretched across 3 counties. When she'd fled the makeshift chapel at her family's ranch, she knew they would hunt her down. The sound of approaching riders forced her deeper into the brush. Her wedding dress, once pristine white, was now a tattered flag of surrender. Thorns tore at the delicate lace as she pushed through a thicket, emerging onto a dirt road that led to nowhere she recognized. "You can't run from family, girl." Her cousin Jeremiah's voice rang out, closer now. "Your uncle made a deal and Thornton's paid good money for you." Madeline froze as 3 riders appeared on the road ahead, cutting off her escape. Behind her, 2 more approached. She was surrounded, her Uncle Pierce's weathered face twisted in a combination of rage and satisfaction as he dismounted and stalked toward her. "You've embarrassed me for the last time," he snarled, raising his hand. "Thornton's waiting, and by God, you'll be his wife before sundown." "I would rather die," Madeline said, her voice steady despite her fear. Pierce laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "That can be arranged if you keep this foolishness up. The lady doesn't seem interested in your arrangement." The deep voice cut through the tension like a knife. All heads turned toward the road where a tall figure sat astride a powerful black stallion. The stranger wore a worn leather duster, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, and a bandana covering the lower half of his face against the dust. At his hip hung a Colt revolver, his hand resting casually near it. "This doesn't concern you, mister," Pierce growled. "This here's family business." The stranger nudged his horse forward, the animal's muscles rippling beneath a coat that gleamed like polished obsidian in the harsh sunlight. As he approached, Madeline could see piercing blue eyes beneath the shadow of his hat. "When a woman's being cornered 5-1, it becomes my business," the stranger said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made even Pierce hesitate. "Especially when she's clearly not willing." "She's my niece," Pierce said, his hand hovering near his own pistol. "And she's promised to a good man who paid a handsome bride price." The stranger's eyes flicked to Madeline, taking in her disheveled appearance, the fear and determination in her eyes. Without another word, he maneuvered his horse between her and her relatives. "She's under my protection now," he said simply. Jeremiah, always quick to anger, reached for his gun. "You've got no right." The stranger's revolver appeared in his hand so quickly it seemed to materialize from thin air. He didn't aim it directly at any of them, but the message was clear. "I wouldn't," he said quietly. Pierce assessed the situation, his eyes narrowing as he recognized something in the stranger's bearing. "Boys, back down," he ordered, though his face flushed with rage. "For now." "The lady's coming with me," the stranger said, extending his free hand toward Madeline. "Your choice, madam." Madeline didn't hesitate. She grasped his hand and felt herself lifted effortlessly onto the horse behind him. The stallion pranced sideways, ready to run. "This isn't over," Pierce called as they began to move away. "You don't know what you're getting into, stranger." The man said nothing, only nudged his horse into a gallop. Madeline wrapped her arms around his waist, holding tight as they thundered down the road, dust billowing behind them. She glanced back once to see her relatives growing smaller in the distance, her uncle's face a mask of fury. "Thank you," she whispered against the stranger's back, uncertain if he could hear her over the pounding of hooves, but he did. "Name's Wade Zimmerman," he said over his shoulder, his voice carried away by the wind. "And you'd better hold on tight, miss." "Madeline," she replied, tightening her grip. "Madeline Vance." The horse maintained its powerful stride, eating up the miles between Madeline and her past. She didn't know who this man was or where they were headed, but for the first time since her parents' death had left her at the mercy of her uncle. Madeline felt something like hope. They rode hard for nearly an hour, following a winding trail that led deeper into the rugged landscape. Wade Zimmerman handled the horse with expert ease, navigating narrow passages between towering red rock formations that would hide their trail. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, he slowed the stallion to a walk. "We'll stop here for a bit," Wade said, guiding the horse into a sheltered alcove where a small spring bubbled up from the ground. "Give Midnight a chance to rest." He dismounted in one fluid motion, then turned to help Madeline down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground, unaccustomed to hours of hard riding. Wade's strong hands steadied her, then quickly released her once she found her balance. Now that they had stopped, Madeline had her first clear look at her rescuer. He pulled down his bandana, revealing a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he was in his early 30s. Not conventionally handsome, perhaps, but there was something compelling about his features, a quiet strength that matched the calm authority in his voice. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his blue eyes studying her with concern. Madeline shook her head. "Just scratches from the brush, nothing serious." She looked down at her ruined wedding dress and gave a short, humorless laugh. "Though I've seen better days." Wade nodded, then turned to tend to his horse, removing the saddle to let Midnight cool down properly. He worked methodically, his movements efficient and practiced. "Your uncle seems like a determined man," he said without looking at her. "Why was he so set on this marriage?" Madeline sank down onto a flat rock, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "Money," she said simply. "Silas Thornton owns half the mining interests in the territory. My uncle's ranch is failing. He saw an opportunity. And you were the price." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said, looking down at her hands. "My parents died of fever 2 years ago. The ranch was supposed to come to me when I turned 21 next month, but there were complications with the will. My uncle became my guardian." She paused. "Thornton offered to settle all my uncle's debts in exchange for me." Wade's expression darkened. "How old is this Thornton?" 58, Madeline replied. "He's buried 2 wives already, both young." Wade muttered something under his breath that Madeline didn't catch, but his disapproval was clear. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, offering it to her first. "Thank you," she said, taking a careful sip of the cool water. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "I've got a fair idea," Wade said grimly. He knelt by the spring to refill the canteen. "Where were you planning to go when you ran?" The question caught Madeline off guard. In truth, she'd had no plan beyond escape. "There's a stagecoach station about 20 miles south," she said. "I thought I might find work there or passage to Tucson." Wade nodded, considering. "Your uncle and his men will be watching those routes." "I know," Madeline said, feeling the weight of her situation pressing down on her again. "But I had to try. I couldn't," her voice caught. "I couldn't marry that man." Wade's expression softened slightly. "You won't have to." "Why did you help me?" Madeline asked, the question that had been on her mind since he'd appeared on the road. Wade was quiet for a long moment. "Let's just say I don't hold with forcing anyone into something against their will," he finally said. "Especially not a woman being sold like cattle." Before Madeline could respond, Wade tensed, his head turning sharply toward the trail they had followed. "Someone's coming," he said, his voice low. "Stay here." He moved silently to the edge of their shelter, drawing his revolver as he peered around the rock formation. Madeline held her breath, straining to hear what had alerted him. Then she caught at the distant sound of hoofbeats. "Just one rider," Wade murmured, "coming fast." He positioned himself to intercept whoever was approaching, his body language shifting subtly. The caution in his movements reminded Madeline that she knew nothing about this man who had appointed himself her protector. For all she knew, he could be as dangerous as Thornton in his own way. The hoofbeats grew louder and a voice called out, "Wade, you out here, partner?" The tension drained from Wade's shoulders. "It's all right," he said to Madeline. "A friend." He stepped out from their hiding place and raised a hand in greeting. Moments later, a lean, weather-beaten man on a dun horse came into view, reining in sharply when he spotted Wade. "There you are," the newcomer said, dismounting quickly. Been tracking you since I saw you tear out of Bitter Creek like the devil himself was after you." His eyes widened when he caught sight of Madeline in her tattered wedding dress. "Well, now, this explains a few things. Madeline Vance, this is Daniel Morgan," Wade said. "He's my partner at the Circle Z." "Madam," Daniel said, tipping his hat politely despite his obvious curiosity. "Miss Vance was in some trouble," Wade explained. "Her uncle was trying to force her into marriage with Silas Thornton." Daniel let out a low whistle. "Old Thornton, the mining magnate." He looked at Madeline with newfound respect. "No wonder you ran. What brings you out here, Daniel?" Wade asked. "Trouble," Daniel replied, his expression growing serious. "Pierce Vance and his boys rode into town about an hour after you left. They're telling everyone that you kidnapped his niece from her wedding. Thornton's offering a $500 reward for your capture and the return of his bride." Wade's jaw tightened. "That complicates things. Gets worse," Daniel continued. "They've hired the Farrow brothers to track you down." Madeline saw Wade's expression darken at this news. "Who are the Farrow brothers?" she asked. "Bounty hunters," Wade explained grimly. "Not too particular about bringing folks in alive if dead is easier." "I came to warn you," Daniel said, "and to tell you that Kate's got the back room ready at the ranch if you need it. It's your call, partner." Wade considered for a moment, then nodded. "We'll head to the Circle Z. It's our best option for now." He turned to Madeline. "It's another 4 hours ride. Think you can manage it?" Despite her exhaustion, Madeline nodded. "I'll manage." "I brought supplies," Daniel said, untying a bundle from his saddle, "including some proper clothes for the lady, Kate's doing." He handed the package to Madeline. "They might be a bit large, but better than a wedding dress for riding." "Thank you," Madeline said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "We'll give you some privacy to change," Wade said, guiding Daniel a short distance away to continue their conversation in low voices. Madeline ducked behind a large boulder and quickly exchanged her ruined dress for the simple skirt and blouse that Daniel had brought. The clothes were indeed a bit large, but clean and sturdy. There was even a pair of worn but serviceable boots that fit well enough. As she changed, she could hear snippets of the men's conversation. "Don't know what you're getting into," Daniel was saying. "Thornton's not a man to cross." "I couldn't just leave her," Wade replied. "You'd have done the same." "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "But now we've got Thornton and the Vances gunning for us, and that's before the Farrows even enter the picture." "We'll figure it out," Wade said with finality. When Madeline emerged in her new clothes, both men looked relieved to see her out of the wedding dress. Wade had resaddled Midnight and was securing their few supplies. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help her mount. This time, Wade positioned her in front of him in the saddle. As they set off, Daniel riding slightly ahead to lead the way, Madeline was acutely aware of Wade's presence behind her, his arms on either side as he held the reins. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape and bringing a chill to the air. "Here," Wade said, draping his duster over her shoulders. "Nights get cold out here." The leather was warm from his body and carried a scent that was distinctly him: saddle soap, pine, and something indefinable that reminded Madeline of open spaces. She pulled it closer around herself, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I know I've brought trouble to your doorstep." Wade was quiet for a moment. "Trouble has a way of finding me whether I look for it or not," he finally said. "At least this time it's for a good reason." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horse's gait almost hypnotic. Despite her best efforts, Madeline found herself leaning back against Wade's chest, her eyes growing heavy. "Sleep if you can," he said quietly. "I've got you." Surrounded by the unfamiliar yet oddly comforting presence of this stranger who had risked everything to help her, Madeline allowed herself to drift off, lulled by the steady beat of his heart against her back. When she woke, the world was bathed in moonlight. They were moving through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side. Wade's arm had tightened around her waist, holding her securely as she slept. "Where are we?" she murmured, straightening slightly. "About an hour from the Circle Z," Wade replied. "You slept for a while." "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "Don't be, you needed it." Daniel had dropped back to ride alongside them. "We're taking the long way around," he explained. Staying off the main trails, harder for the pharaohs to track us this way. As if on cue, a sound echoed through the canyon, the distant report of a rifle. Wade instantly stiffened, his hand moving to his revolver. That came from up ahead, Daniel said, his voice tense. Could be nothing, or it could be trouble, Wade countered. Let's hold up here for a minute. They guided their horses into the shadow of an overhanging rock. Wade dismounted silently and helped Madeline down, then handed his reins to Daniel. Stay with her, he instructed. I'm going to scout ahead. Wade, Daniel began to protest. Just to the ridge, Wade assured him. I'll be back in 10 minutes. If I'm not, take her to the ranch and get Kate to hide her. Before either of them could argue, Wade melted into the shadows, moving with the silent efficiency of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. Madeline looked at Daniel questioningly. Was he a soldier? She asked softly. Daniel nodded. Union cavalry, scout and sharpshooter. He hesitated, then added, he doesn't talk about it much. They waited in tense silence, the minutes crawling by. Madeline's imagination conjured images of Wade walking into an ambush, of the Pharaoh brothers lying in wait. When a small stone clattered down the canyon wall nearby, she nearly cried out in alarm. Easy, Daniel murmured, his hand on his pistol. Probably just a critter. The sound of approaching footsteps sent Daniel moving in front of Madeline, his gun drawn. A low whistle sounded, and he relaxed visibly as Wade emerged from the darkness. Hunters, Wade reported, his voice pitched low. Not looking for us, but we should change course just to be safe. They remounted quickly, Wade once again positioning Madeline in front of him. This time, they veered away from their original path, following a barely discernible trail that wound higher into the hills. It'll add an hour to our journey, Wade explained, but better safe than sorry. The night deepened around them as they rode. Overhead, stars crowded the sky in numbers Madeline had never seen in her life near town. The vastness of it all, the star-strewn sky, the endless landscape, the uncertain future stretching before her, left her feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Almost there, Daniel called back some time later as they crested a rise. Below them, nestled in a protected valley, Madeline could make out the dim shapes of buildings, a main house, a barn, and several outbuildings. A few windows glowed with lamplight despite the late hour. The Circle Z, Wade said, a note of pride in his voice. It's not much, but it's home. They approached cautiously, Wade scanning the surrounding countryside for any sign of pursuit. As they rode into the yard, the front door of the main house opened, spilling golden light across the packed earth. A woman stood in the doorway, a rifle held comfortably in her hands. That you, Daniel? She called. It's us, Kate, Daniel replied. We've got company. The woman Kate lowered her rifle as they dismounted. She was tall and angular, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She assessed Madeline with a quick glance, then nodded. Brought trouble home with you again, I see, she said to Wade, but there was no reproach in her tone. This is Madeline Vance, Wade said. Miss Vance, meet Catherine Morgan, Daniel's wife and the best cook in the Arizona Territory. Just Kate will do, the woman said, extending a weathered hand to Madeline. Welcome to the Circle Z, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Daniel told me what he could before he rode out to find you. Thank you for taking me in, Madeline said, shaking Kate's hand. The older woman's grip was firm and reassuring. Any enemy of Silas Thornton is a friend of mine, Kate replied, her mouth set in a grim line. Come inside. You look dead on your feet, child. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, a large main room with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and walls decorated with a few framed photographs and a magnificent quilt. The scent of fresh bread and coffee hung in the air. I kept supper warm, Kate said, leading them toward a wooden table. Eat first, then we'll talk. None of them argued. The hot meal, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread and butter, was the best thing Madeline had tasted in weeks. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. They ate in companionable silence, the men wolfing down their portions with the efficiency of those accustomed to taking meals when they could get them. When they had finished, Kate poured coffee for everyone and settled into a chair at the head of the table. Now, she said, fixing Wade with a stern look, Tell me exactly what kind of hornet's nest you've kicked over this time." Wade recounted the day's events while Daniel added details about the bounty and the Farrow brothers. Kate listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Thornton won't stop," she said when they had finished. "Not with his pride hurt. And $500 will bring out every bounty hunter and glory seeker in the territory." "I know," Wade acknowledged. "But what was I supposed to do? Leave her to that fate?" Kate's expression softened. "Of course not. I'm just saying we need a plan better than hiding her here and hoping for the best." "I can't stay," Madeline said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. "I'm grateful for your help more than I can say, but I won't bring danger to your home. Tomorrow I'll move on." "And go where?" Wade asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. Madeline faltered. I don't know, but I'll figure something out." "No," Wade said firmly. "You're staying right here where we can protect you, at least until we come up with a better solution." "The Circle Z is the safest place for you right now," Daniel added. "We've got good sight lines in every direction, and folks around here know better than to trespass." "Besides," Kate said, "Thornton and your uncle will be watching all the obvious escape routes, stagecoach stations, train depots, even the trails to neighboring towns. Better to lie low while we figure out our next move." Madeline looked at these three strangers who had risked everything to help her and felt a lump form in her throat. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" Kate and Daniel exchanged a glance, then looked at Wade, who seemed suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "Some things are just right," he finally said, "and some are wrong. Forcing a young woman to marry a man old enough to be her grandfather for money, that's wrong." There was something in his tone, a hint of old pain that made Madeline wonder what else lay behind his decision. But before she could pursue it, Kate rose from the table. "You need rest," she said to Madeline. "I've made up the room at the back of the house for you. It's small but private." "Thank you," Madeline said, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "We'll worry about that later," Kate said, leading her toward a narrow hallway. "For now, just get some sleep." The room was indeed small, with just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. But to Madeline, who had spent the past 2 years sleeping in a drafty attic room at her uncle's ranch, it seemed luxurious. Fresh linens covered the bed, and a pitcher of water stood on the washstand alongside a cloth and a bar of soap that smelled faintly of lavender. "There's a nightgown in the drawer," Kate said. "It's one of mine, so it'll be large, but it's clean. We'll see about getting you some more clothes tomorrow." "This is more than enough," Madeline said, overwhelmed by the woman's kindness. Kate paused at the door. "Wade's a good man," she said unexpectedly. "One of the best I know. Whatever happens, you can trust him." With that cryptic comment, she left, closing the door softly behind her. Madeline washed her face and hands, grateful to remove the dust of the trail, then changed into the offered nightgown. As predicted, it was several sizes too large, but the soft cotton felt wonderful against her skin. She blew out the lamp and climbed into bed, expecting to fall asleep instantly. Instead, she found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the day. How quickly life could change. This morning, she had been facing a future as Silas Thornton's unwilling bride. Now, she was in hiding at a strange ranch, protected by people she had just met through the thin walls. She could hear the murmur of voices from the main room, Wade, Daniel, and Kate discussing their situation. She couldn't make out the words, but the low rumble of Wade's voice was oddly comforting. Whatever Kate had said, Madeline did trust him, though she couldn't have explained why. There was something about the way he looked at her, not as property to be claimed or a problem to be solved, but as a person whose choices mattered. Lulled by the distant voices and the unfamiliar comfort of the bed, Madeline finally drifted into sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Wade's arms around her as they rode through the night, and the way he had said, "I've got you." Dawn came early at the Circle Z. Madeline woke to the sounds of activity outside her window, horses nickering, a man's voice giving quiet commands, the creak of a windmill turning in the morning breeze. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back and she sat up quickly. A knock at her door was followed by Kate's voice. "Madeline, are you awake?" "Yes," she called back. "Come in." Kate entered carrying a bundle of clothing. "I've brought you a few things," she said, placing them on the chest of drawers. "They're mine, so they'll be a bit roomy, but we can take them in later. There's also a comb and some hairpins." "Thank you," Madeline said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Kate smiled, the expression softening her weathered features. "Get dressed and come to breakfast when you're ready. The men are already out seeing to the morning chores." Left alone, Madeline washed and dressed quickly. The skirt and blouse Kate had provided were simple but well made, and though they hung loosely on her slender frame, they were a vast improvement over her ruined wedding dress. She combed her long brown hair and pinned it up as neatly as she could, wanting to look presentable for her hosts. The kitchen was warm and filled with the aroma of coffee, bacon, and biscuits. Kate worked efficiently at the stove while a young Mexican woman kneaded dough at a side table. "Ah, there you are," Kate said when she spotted Madeline. "This is Alina. She helps with the cooking and housekeeping." Alina smiled shyly. "Buenos dias, señorita." Alina doesn't speak much English, Kate explained, but she understands more than she lets on. "It's nice to meet you, Alina," Madeline said, returning the smile. "Sit," Kate instructed, pointing to the table. "The men will be in shortly." "They like to check the perimeter first thing." "Perimeter?" Madeline asked, accepting a cup of coffee. "Wade's military training," Kate explained. "He likes to make sure everything's secure, especially now." As if summoned by his name, Wade appeared in the doorway, Daniel close behind him. Both men had clearly been up for hours. Their clothes bore traces of dust and hay, and Wade's sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. Madeline found herself noticing details she had missed in the chaos of the previous day, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the fan of lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "Morning," Wade said, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he moved to wash his hands at the basin by the door. "Sleep all right?" "Very well, thank you," Madeline replied, feeling inexplicably self-conscious under his gaze. They settled around the table, and Kate served a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, and biscuits with gravy. Again, they ate with the focused attention of people who viewed food as necessary fuel rather than a social occasion. It wasn't until the edge had been taken off their hunger that conversation began. "I rode out to the North Ridge," Daniel reported. "No sign of anyone, but I found tracks about 3 miles out, 3 riders heading east. Could be the Pharaohs." Wade nodded, his expression thoughtful. "They'll circle back. I'll take the South Trail after breakfast, see if there's any activity there." "I don't like you riding out alone," Kate said, concern evident in her voice. "I'll be careful," Wade promised. He turned to Madeline. "You should stay close to the house today. The barn and corral are fine, but don't go beyond them." Madeline nodded, understanding the warning. "Is there anything I can do to help around the ranch?" she asked. "I'm not used to sitting idle." Kate's expression brightened. "Can you cook?" "Yes," Madeline said, "and so?" "I used to handle most of the household duties after my mother died." "Good," Kate said with satisfaction. "Alina and I could use the help. We're short-handed as it is, with just the 4 of us running this place." After breakfast, the men headed out again, Daniel to check on the cattle in the south pasture, Wade to scout the trails. Kate set Madeline to work helping Alina prepare food for the midday meal, kneading bread dough and chopping vegetables for a stew. As they worked, Kate shared the history of the Circle Z. "It was nothing but a run-down line shack when Wade bought it 5 years ago," she explained. "Daniel and I were working at a ranch over in New Mexico that went under. Wade offered us a partnership. We put in labor instead of money." "It's a beautiful place," Madeline said, looking out the window at the well-maintained buildings and corrals. "You've accomplished a lot." "Wade's the one with the vision," Kate said. "He sees what could be, not just what is." Drove himself nearly to collapse those first 2 years, working from sunup to sundown. "How did he end up here?" Madeline asked, curious about the man who had risked so much to help her. Kate's expression grew guarded. "That's Wade's story to tell if he chooses to," she said. "But I will say this, he knows what it's like to be trapped in a situation with no good way out." Maybe that's why he couldn't ride past when he saw you in trouble. Before Madeline could ask more, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. Kate moved swiftly to the window, her body tense until she recognized the rider. "It's Wade," she said with relief. Madeline joined her at the window, watching as Wade dismounted in the yard. Even from a distance, she could see that something was wrong. His movements were tight, controlled in a way that suggested suppressed anger or concern. "Stay here," Kate said, heading for the door. Through the open window, Madeline could hear their conversation. "Riders coming," Wade said without preamble. 6 of them, including Pierce Vance and 2 of his men, the Farrow brothers, are with them. "How far out?" Kate asked, her voice calm despite the news. "Maybe an hour," Wade replied. "They're following our trail from yesterday. Daniel, still out checking the south herd," Kate said. "Should be back soon," Wade nodded. "Get the rifles ready. I don't think they'll start shooting, not with a woman present, but I want to be prepared." "And Madeline?" Kate asked. There was a pause before Wade answered. "Keep her inside. If things go bad, get her out through the back and head for the cave we used during the Apache troubles. You remember the way?" "I remember," Kate confirmed. "Wade, be careful. The Farrows don't play fair." "I know," he said grimly. "That's why I'm counting on you to be ready." They moved away from the window, their voices fading. Madeline stood frozen, a sick feeling in her stomach. Her uncle was coming, and he was bringing men known for their willingness to kill. All because of her. The door opened and Kate returned, her face set in determined lines. "You heard." Madeline nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "It might not come to violence," Kate said, moving to a cabinet and removing a shotgun. "But we'll be ready if it does. Can you handle a firearm?" "My father taught me to shoot," Madeline said, "but I've never fired at a person." "Let's hope you won't have to start today," Kate replied, checking the shotgun with practiced efficiency. "But if it comes to it, remember, aim for the center of the body, not the head or limbs, and don't hesitate." The next hour passed in tense preparation. Alina was sent to the root cellar with instructions to stay hidden. Kate positioned herself near a window with a clear view of the yard, the shotgun within easy reach. Wade moved between the house and the barn, speaking briefly with the ranch hand who had returned from checking the herd, ensuring everyone knew their roles if trouble started. Daniel returned just as the first riders appeared on the horizon, dust rising behind them as they approached the ranch. Wade met him in the yard, the 2 men exchanging quick words before taking up positions. Wade on the porch of the main house, Daniel near the barn with a rifle held casually but ready. From her position at the window, Madeline could see her uncle leading the group, his face set in grim lines. Behind him rode her cousins Jeremiah and Thomas, both armed. The other 3 men were strangers to her, hard-faced men with the watchful eyes of predators. The Farrow brothers, she assumed, and perhaps one of Thornton's men. The riders pulled up in the yard, maintaining a slight distance from the house. No one reached for weapons, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Zimmerman," Pierce Vance called, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Wade stood relaxed on the porch, one hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. "Nothing here belongs to you, Vance," he replied. "But you're welcome to water your horses before you move on." Pierce's face flushed with anger. "My niece," he spat. "She's coming back with us one way or another." "The lady made her choice," Wade said, his voice level. "She doesn't want to go with you." "She's not of age," Pierce argued. "I'm her legal guardian until she turns 21. "That's so?" Wade asked. "Seems to me a woman old enough to be married off is old enough to decide where she wants to live." One of the strangers, a lean, scarred man with cold eyes, nudged his horse forward. "This is getting us nowhere," he said. "We're not here to debate the law." "Thornton's offering $500 for the girl and another $100 for the man who took her." "That would be you, Farrow?" Wade asked, a dangerous edge entering his voice. The man smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "Wyatt Farrow, at your service." "My brothers and I specialize in bringing in folks who don't want to be found." "I've heard of you," Wade said. "Heard you shot a man in the back in El Paso last year when the bounty didn't specify alive." Wyatt Farrow's smile didn't waver. "Business is business. Now, why don't you send the girl out and maybe we can all walk away from this?" Not going to happen, Wade said flatly. Pierce Vance's patience visibly snapped. Enough of this, Madeline, he shouted toward the house. Get out here now, you've caused enough trouble. Inside, Madeline flinched at her uncle's voice. Kate placed a steadying hand on her arm. You don't have to go out there, she murmured, but Madeline had already made her decision. She couldn't hide while others faced danger on her behalf. Taking a deep breath, she moved toward the door. Wait, Kate said, catching her arm. Take this. She pressed a small derringer into Madeline's hand, just in case. Madeline tucked the tiny gun into the pocket of her skirt and stepped outside. The sudden silence as she appeared on the porch was deafening. Wade shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the riders. Uncle Pierce, Madeline said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm not going back. This isn't a discussion, Pierce snapped. Get on a horse, now. Thornton's still willing to marry you despite your disgraceful behavior. No, Madeline said simply, Pierce's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful, that's enough, Wade cut in. She's made her choice. Ride on, Vance. Or what? Jeremiah challenged, his hand moving toward his gun. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted from tense to deadly. Wade's revolver appeared in his hand, though Madeline hadn't seen him draw it. Daniel raised his rifle slightly, and from the window of the house came the distinctive sound of a shotgun being cocked. Don't, Wade warned, his voice soft but carrying. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Wyatt Farrow studied the situation with calculating eyes. Stand down, boys, he said to Pierce and his sons. This isn't the time or place. I paid you to get her back, Pierce protested. You paid us to find her, Farrow corrected. We found her. Getting her back might require a different approach. His cold eyes fixed on Wade. This isn't over, Zimmerman. Never thought it was, Wade replied evenly. With obvious reluctance, Pierce and his sons backed their horses away. The Farrow brothers followed more slowly, their assessing gazes taking in every detail of the ranch's defenses. Madeline, Pierce called as a parting shot. When Thornton hears about this, he'll see to it that you never inherit a single acre of your father's land. You've chosen poorly, girl. She said nothing, watching silently as the riders turned and rode away, dust billowing behind them. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Wade holster his weapon. They'll be back, he said quietly. With more men, Daniel added, joining them on the porch. Wade nodded, his expression grim. We need to prepare, he glanced at Madeline. You did well. Not many would have the courage to face down men like that. They're going to come after you because of me, she said, her voice tight with guilt. All of you. Wade's blue eyes met hers directly. They were going to come after me anyway, he said. Once I took you from that road, the die was cast. Don't blame yourself for their actions. Wade's right, Kate said, emerging from the house with the shotgun still in her hands. And we faced worse than Pierce Vance and some hired guns. Daniel nodded in agreement. Besides, seeing your uncle's face when you told him no was almost worth the trouble. Despite the gravity of the situation, Madeline found herself smiling at Daniel's attempt at humor. Thank you, she said, looking at each of them in turn. I don't know what I've done to deserve such friends, but I'm grateful. Let's get inside, Wade suggested. We need to make plans. The rest of the day was spent preparing for the possibility of an attack. Wade and Daniel checked and cleaned every weapon on the ranch, positioning them strategically throughout the buildings. Extra water barrels were filled, and supplies were gathered that could be quickly packed if they needed to flee. The ranch hand was sent to a neighboring property with a message for the local sheriff, though Wade held little hope that help would arrive in time if trouble started. Madeline insisted on helping, refusing to be treated as a helpless burden. She worked alongside Kate and Alina, preparing food that could be eaten cold if necessary and packing medical supplies. When those tasks were completed, she asked Wade to check her skill with the derringer Kate had given her. They stood behind the barn, Wade setting up empty cans on a fence post for her to target. His proximity as he adjusted her grip on the small gun sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. Steady your wrist, he instructed, his voice close to her ear. This little gun doesn't have much range, but at close quarters it can save your life. Madeline fired, missing the target by several inches. Wade didn't comment, just reloaded the derringer and handed it back to her. Try again, he said. Remember to breathe." She fired 5 more times, gradually improving until her last shot knocked a can from the post. Wade nodded in approval. "Good," he said. "But remember, with a gun this small, you need to be close. If it comes to using it, don't hesitate and don't miss." "I hope it doesn't come to that," Madeline said quietly. Wade's expression softened slightly. "So do I." As they walked back toward the house, Madeline gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since the previous day. "Why did you really help me?" she asked. "And don't say it was just because it was the right thing to do. There's more to it than that." Wade was silent for so long that Madeline thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, pitched for her ears alone. "My sister," he said finally. "She was forced into marriage with a man much older than her, a powerful man in our town back in Missouri. Our father arranged it to settle his debts." He paused. "She died in childbirth a year later. She was 19. "I'm so sorry," Madeline said, understanding flooding through her. Wade nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "When I saw you on that road, surrounded by men trying to force you into the same fate, I couldn't ride past. I couldn't fail another young woman the way I failed Emma." Without thinking, Madeline reached out and touched his arm. "You didn't fail her," she said softly. "And you certainly didn't fail me." Wade looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. For the first time since he'd rescued her, Madeline saw Wade not just as her protector, but as a man with his own pain and his own reasons for the choices he made. The moment was broken by Daniel's voice calling from the house. "Wade, rider coming." They hurried back to find Daniel on the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. A single rider was approaching from the east, not the direction Pierce and his men had taken. "It's Ben Taylor," Daniel reported as Wade joined him. "Coming fast." Wade relaxed slightly. Ben Taylor owned the neighboring ranch and was one of the few people in the area Wade considered a friend. The rider galloped into the yard and reined his horse to a stop, dust billowing around him. "Wade," he called, dismounting quickly. "Trouble's coming." "We know," Wade replied. "Pierce, Vance, and the Pharaohs were here earlier." Ben shook his head. "Not just them. Thornton's hired every gun he can find in Bitter Creek. They're organizing at Vance's ranch right now, at least 15 men, maybe more." Wade's expression hardened. "When?" "Tomorrow," Ben said. "At first light." "They're not even pretending it's legal. Thornton's calling it a retrieval of his property." His eyes flicked to Madeline, standing on the porch. "No offense, madam." "None taken," Madeline said, though her stomach churned at the news. "You need to leave," Ben continued, turning back to Wade. "Tonight, my wife's cousin is the station master at Silver Junction. He can get you on the eastbound train without questions, but you need to go now." Wade exchanged a look with Daniel, a silent communication born of years working together. Daniel nodded slightly. "We'll take the mountain trail," Wade decided. "Less chance of being seen. All of you should go," Ben urged. "They're mad enough to burn this place to the ground." "Someone needs to stay and make it look like we're all here," Daniel said. "Buy them time to get away." "No," Wade protested. "I'm not leaving you and Kate to face them alone." "You're not," Daniel replied firmly. "Ben and I can handle it. We'll make it look like we're preparing for a siege, then slip away before they arrive. By the time they realize you're gone, you'll be halfway to Silver Junction." A tense discussion followed, but in the end, the logic of Daniel's plan prevailed. Wade would take Madeline and Kate to Silver Junction, where they could catch the train east. Daniel and Ben would create the illusion that the ranch was being defended, then retreat before Thornton's men arrived. "You have 2 hours to pack and be ready," Daniel told Wade. "Only take what you can carry on horseback." As the others moved to prepare, Madeline stood frozen on the porch, overwhelmed by the speed with which events were unfolding. Once again, her life was being uprooted, and once again, others were paying the price for her freedom. Wade appeared beside her, his expression concerned. "Are you all right? This is all happening because of me," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Your home, your ranch, buildings can be rebuilt," Wade said firmly. "Land can be reclaimed. What matters is that no one gets hurt." "But Madeline," Wade interrupted, using her first name for the first time. "I made my choice when I rode up to that road yesterday. I don't regret it." The intensity in his eyes silenced her protests. There was something more than duty or obligation in his gaze, something that made her heart beat faster and her breath catch in her throat. "Now," he said, his voice gentler, "we need to pack. Kate will help you get ready." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Madeline had little to pack beyond the clothes Kate had given her and the derringer, which she kept in her pocket. Kate worked efficiently, gathering supplies and essential items, her calm demeanor belying the seriousness of their situation. "It's not the first time we've had to leave in a hurry," she explained when Madeline commented on her composure. "Life out here teaches you to be ready for anything." As dusk approached, 3 horses were saddled and waiting in the barn: Wade's black stallion, Midnight, and 2 sturdy mares for Kate and Madeline. Wade had changed into dark clothing that would blend with the night, and his saddlebags bulged with supplies. A rifle was secured to his saddle, and Madeline knew he carried at least 1 pistol. Daniel embraced his wife tightly before helping her mount. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. "A day, 2 at most." "You'd better be," Kate replied, her voice thick with emotion despite her attempt at sternness. Wade and Daniel clasped hands, exchanging a few quiet words that Madeline couldn't hear. Then Wade turned to her, offering his hand to help her mount. As she settled into the saddle, he checked the cinch and adjusted her stirrups with practiced ease. "Stay close to me," he instructed. "The trail is rough in places and we'll be riding in darkness for most of it." Madeline nodded, gripping the reins tightly. She had ridden all her life, but never in conditions like these, fleeing for safety in the night, pursued by men who wouldn't hesitate to use violence to get what they wanted. "Ready?" Wade asked, mounting Midnight with fluid grace. "As I'll ever be," Madeline replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. With a final farewell to Daniel and Ben, they rode out, keeping to the shadows as they left the ranch behind. Wade led them not toward the main trail, but toward a narrow path that wound into the foothills. The moon was rising, providing just enough light to see by without making them too visible from a distance. They rode in silence for the first hour, concentrating on the difficult terrain. The path climbed steadily, switching back and forth across the face of the hill. Pine trees closed in around them, their branches casting deep shadows across the trail. The air grew cooler as they gained elevation, and Madeline was grateful for the sturdy jacket Kate had insisted she wear. Finally, they reached a small plateau where the trail leveled out briefly. Wade signaled a halt, allowing the horses to rest while he consulted with Kate about their route. "We're making good time," he said, his voice low. "Another 4 hours to Silver Junction if all goes well." "And if it doesn't?" Madeline asked. Wade's expression was difficult to read in the moonlight. "Then we improvise," he said simply. They continued on, the trail growing narrower as it wound through a dense stand of pines. The horses picked their way carefully over rocky ground, their breathing loud in the quiet night. Overhead, stars glittered in the clear sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Madeline found herself studying Wade's back as he rode ahead of her, the set of his shoulders, the way he moved in perfect harmony with his horse. In the 2 days since he had ridden into her life, he had shown her more kindness and respect than she had experienced in the 2 years since her parents' deaths. The thought of parting ways with him after they reached Silver Junction left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. Lost in these thoughts, she almost didn't notice when Wade suddenly reined Midnight to a halt, his posture alert. Kate pulled up beside him, her hand moving to the rifle secured to her saddle. "What is it?" Madeline whispered, urging her mare forward. Wade held up a hand for silence, his head tilted as he listened intently. For a moment, Madeline heard nothing beyond the ordinary sounds of the night, then the distant crack of a twig breaking, the soft nickering of a horse that wasn't one of theirs. "Someone's following us," Wade murmured. "Kate, take Madeline and continue on the trail. I'll circle back and see who it is." "No," Kate protested. "We stay together." "If it's the Pharaohs, they'll be expecting that," Wade argued. "This way I can lead them away from you if necessary. And if there's more than one group." Kate challenged. Wade hesitated, then conceded the point. "We'll stay together for now, but change our route. There's an old mining trail about half a mile ahead, rougher going but less likely to be watched. They pressed on, moving more quickly now despite the difficult terrain. Madeline's heart pounded with every sound from the forest around them, her imagination populating the shadows with pursuers. When they reached the junction Wade had mentioned, he led them onto an even narrower path that seemed to disappear into a wall of pine trees. "Stay close," he warned. This trail hasn't been maintained in years. The trail was barely visible, more a suggestion than an actual path. They were forced to ride single file, ducking low-hanging branches and navigating around fallen logs. Their progress slowed significantly, but the dense forest provided better cover from anyone who might be searching for them. They had been following this new route for perhaps an hour when the sound of gunfire erupted behind them, 3 shots in rapid succession, followed by a longer pause and then 2 more. "That's Daniel's signal," Kate said, her voice tight with worry. "He's letting us know they've been spotted." Wade's expression hardened. "They found the ranch sooner than we expected. We need to move faster." They urged their horses to a quicker pace, risking the uneven ground in the interest of speed. Madeline's mare stumbled once, nearly sending her over its head, but she managed to keep her seat. The forest grew denser, the moonlight barely penetrating the canopy above them. When they emerged from the trees onto a rocky ledge, Wade called another halt. Below them stretched a vast expanse of wilderness, silver-tipped in the moonlight. In the far distance, Madeline could just make out the faint glow of Light's silver junction, she assumed. "We're about halfway there," Wade confirmed, following her gaze. "But this next stretch is exposed, will be visible if anyone's watching from higher ground. Could we wait until full dark?" Madeline suggested. Wade shook his head. "We need to reach the station before the eastbound train arrives at dawn, and," he hesitated, "I think we're still being followed." "How can you tell?" Kate asked, her hand moving to her rifle again. "Just a feeling," Wade admitted. "But my feelings have kept me alive this long." They decided to press on, keeping to what cover they could find as they descended from the ridge. The trail here was marginally better, an old wagon road that had once served the mines in the area. Their horses moved more confidently on the firmer ground, allowing them to make better time. They had covered perhaps 2 miles when Wade suddenly stiffened, raising his hand in a signal to stop. This time, Madeline heard what had alerted him, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, coming not from behind them but from ahead. "Off the trail," Wade ordered, guiding Midnight into a dense thicket of scrub oak. Quick and quiet, they dismounted, leading their horses deeper into the brush. Wade positioned them behind a fallen log that offered some concealment while allowing them to see the trail. He drew his revolver, checking it with practiced efficiency. "Could be innocent travelers," Kate whispered, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it, "at this hour on this trail." Wade replied skeptically, "Not likely." They didn't have to wait long. 3 riders appeared around a bend in the trail, moving slowly, clearly searching for signs of passage. Even in the dim light, Madeline recognized the lean, predatory figure of Wyatt Farrow in the lead. The other 2 were strangers to her, but their watchful demeanor and the rifles they carried identified them clearly enough. "They're cutting us off," Wade murmured. "They must have split up to cover both directions." "What do we do?" Madeline asked, fear tightening her throat. Wade considered for a moment. "We wait until they pass, then double back and find another route." But the Farrows didn't pass. About 50 yards from their hiding place, Wyatt raised his hand and the 3 riders stopped. He dismounted, kneeling to examine the ground. "Fresh tracks," they heard him say. 3 horses heading this way, can't be more than half an hour ahead of us." One of the other men spat into the dirt. "Could be anyone. These hills have prospectors all over." 3 horses, one of them shod with that distinctive pattern I pointed out at the ranch," Farrow countered. "It's them, and they're close." He remounted, scanning the surrounding forest with narrowed eyes. They've left the trail, spread out in search. The 3 riders separated, each taking a different direction. One headed directly toward their hiding place. "We need to move," Wade whispered. "Now." They retreated deeper into the forest, leading their nervous horses as quietly as possible. Madeline's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when a shout went up from behind them. "Tracks here, fresh ones? Run," Wade ordered, helping Madeline into her saddle. "Head west toward that ridge, don't stop for anything." They burst from the cover of the trees, abandoning stealth for speed. Madeline bent low over her mare's neck, urging the animal to its fastest pace. Behind them, shouts rang out, followed by the crack of gunfire. A bullet whined past Madeline's head, close enough that she felt the disturbed air against her cheek. Wade and Kate returned fire, providing covering fire as they raced toward the ridge Wade had indicated. The terrain was treacherous in the moonlight, littered with loose rocks and unexpected dips, but their horses were sure-footed and determined. They reached the base of the ridge and began to climb, following a deer trail that wound among the rocks. The steepness of the slope slowed their pursuers, giving them a momentary advantage. When they crested the ridge, Wade led them not down the other side but along its spine, following the high ground. "The old Anderson mine is about 2 miles ahead," he called over the pounding of hooves. "We can lose them in the tunnels if necessary." They rode hard, the horses giving their all despite the difficult terrain. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter as the pharaohs struggled with the unfamiliar ground. For a brief, hopeful moment, Madeline thought they might escape cleanly. Then Kate's horse stumbled, its foreleg plunging into a hidden hole. The mare went down hard, throwing Kate clear but falling awkwardly. The horse's shriek of pain cut through the night. Wade wheeled Midnight around, leaping from the saddle almost before the stallion had stopped. He reached Kate in seconds, kneeling beside her. "I'm all right," Kate gasped, already struggling to sit up. "Just had the wind knocked out of me." Madeline dismounted and hurried to help, supporting Kate as she got to her feet. The older woman winced but seemed able to stand. "The mare's leg is broken," Wade said grimly after a quick examination of the fallen horse. "She won't be going anywhere." "Take my horse," Madeline said immediately. "I can hide somewhere until it's safe." "No one's getting left behind," Wade said firmly. He helped Kate toward Madeline's mount. "You'll ride double with Madeline. I'll deal with the mare." They both knew what that meant. Wade drew his revolver and approached the injured horse, murmuring softly to the animal. Madeline turned away, unable to watch. The sound of the single shot echoed across the ridge, followed by a heavy silence. "Let's go," Wade said, his voice tight as he returned to them. "That shot will have told them exactly where we are." With Kate seated behind Madeline, they set off again, moving more slowly now with the extra weight on the one horse. Wade led them off the ridge, down into a narrow canyon that offered some protection from view. "The mine's just ahead," he said, pointing to a dark opening in the canyon wall. "We can rest the horses there and decide our next move." The abandoned mine entrance was partially collapsed, but there was enough space for them to lead the horses inside. The tunnel beyond was black as pitch, the air cool and damp with a metallic tang. Wade produced a small lantern from his saddlebag and lit it, the warm glow revealing rough-hewn walls supported by rotting timbers. "Is it safe?" Madeline asked, eyeing the sagging roof nervously. "Safe enough for now," Wade replied. "This section was reinforced better than most. Just don't go deeper without me." They unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down as best they could, giving them water from their canteens. Kate examined a nasty scrape on her arm from the fall but declared it nothing serious. "What now?" she asked, looking to Wade. "We've lost too much time." "We'll never make Silver Junction before dawn." Wade's expression was grim in the lantern light. "We need to split up," he said. "The pharaohs are tracking me, not you two. If I lead them away, you can circle back to the main trail and still make Silver Junction by morning." "No," Madeline protested immediately. "We stay together. It's our best chance," Wade argued. "Midnight can outrun anything they're riding, especially with just me on him. I can lead them on a chase that will take them miles from your route." "And then what?" Kate asked. "Where will you go?" "I'll circle back and meet you in Silver City in 3 days," Wade said. "There's a hotel there, the Silver Dollar. Wait for me there." Madeline wanted to argue further, but the logic of his plan was undeniable. With Kate injured and their reduced mobility, they were too vulnerable traveling together. Still, the thought of Wade facing the pharaohs alone filled her with dread. "I don't like it," she said softly. Wade's expression softened as he looked at her. Neither do I, he admitted. But I like the alternatives even less. They rested for an hour, allowing the horses to recover their strength. Wade used the time to study a rough map he carried, plotting routes for both groups. Madeline found herself watching him covertly, memorizing the lines of his face, the way his hands moved over the map, the quiet confidence in his voice as he explained the plan to Kate. When it was time to leave, Wade helped resaddle the horses, checking and double-checking every strap and buckle. He gave Kate most of their remaining ammunition and provisions, keeping only what he would need for himself. Remember, he instructed, stay off the main trails until you're within sight of Silver Junction. Once you're on the train, you should be safe. Kate nodded, her expression solemn. We'll be at the Silver Dollar in 3 days, she said. Don't be late. I won't, Wade promised. He turned to Madeline, his blue eyes searching her face in the lantern light. Take care of yourself. Without thinking, Madeline stepped forward and embraced him, holding tight for a brief moment. You too, she whispered. Please be careful. Wade's arms closed around her, strong and steady. I will, he said softly, his breath warm against her hair. Then he was stepping back, his expression composed once more. He extinguished the lantern and led them to the mine entrance, peering out cautiously to ensure the way was clear. No sign of them yet, he reported. But they'll be searching the area. I'll head north, making enough noise to draw their attention. Wait 10 minutes after I'm gone, then head east like we discussed. With a final nod to Kate and a last look at Madeline that held more than he could say, Wade mounted midnight and was gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading quickly in the night. The 10 minutes that followed were among the longest of Madeline's life. She and Kate waited in tense silence, straining to hear any sound from outside. Twice, they heard distant gunfire, and Madeline's heart clenched with fear for Wade. He knows what he's doing, Kate said, reading her expression even in the darkness. This isn't his first chase. When it was time, they mounted carefully, Kate seated behind Madeline once more. They emerged from the mine into a night now silent and still, as if the earlier violence had never happened. Following Wade's instructions, they headed east, keeping to the shadows and moving as quietly as possible. The remainder of their journey passed in a state of hypervigilance, every sound causing them to freeze and listen for pursuit. But the pharaohs had apparently taken Wade's bait, for they encountered no one as they made their way gradually back toward the main trail to Silver Junction. Dawn was breaking as they crested a final ridge and saw the small settlement below them, a cluster of buildings around the railroad tracks, smoke already rising from several chimneys. The eastbound train sat at the station, steam billowing from its engine as it prepared for departure. We made it, Kate said, relief evident in her voice. They rode into town as inconspicuously as possible, avoiding the curious stares of early risers. At the station, Kate purchased tickets while Madeline waited with the horse, her shawl pulled forward to shadow her face. The station master, Ben's wife's cousin as promised, asked no questions about their disheveled appearance, simply nodded and processed their tickets with efficient haste. All aboard in 5 minutes, he informed them, glancing at the large clock on the wall. You'll want to hurry. Kate arranged for their horse to be stabled until Daniel could collect it, then joined Madeline on the platform. The train loomed beside them, its massive iron presence promising escape and safety. Where does it go? Madeline asked, realizing she hadn't even thought to ask their destination. Denver, Kate replied. From there, we can decide our next move. As they boarded, finding seats in a nearly empty car, Madeline gazed out the window at the small town where their flight had ended. Somewhere out there, Wade was still leading the pharaohs on a chase through the wilderness, risking his life to ensure her safety. The thought filled her with equal measures of gratitude and worry. The train whistle blew, a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo her own feelings. With a lurch and the hiss of steam, they began to move, picking up speed as they left Silver Junction behind. He'll be all right, Kate said, patting Madeline's hand. Wade survived worse than the Pharaoh brothers. Madeline nodded, though the knot of fear in her stomach remained. As the train carried them east, toward an uncertain future but away from immediate danger, she made a silent promise to herself. Whatever happened next, she would find a way to repay the debt she owed to the man who had looked at a desperate woman on a dusty road and said, "She's under my protection now." 3 days later, Madeline stood at the window of their hotel room in Silver City, watching the street below for any sign of Wade. The Silver Dollar Hotel was a modest establishment but clean and respectable, catering primarily to businessmen and the occasional wealthy tourist. Their room on the second floor offered a clear view of the main street, allowing Madeline to spot anyone approaching. "Wearing a hole in the floor won't make him arrive any sooner," Kate observed from where she sat mending a tear in her skirt. The older woman's practical nature had been a steadying influence during their journey, but even she couldn't hide her concern as the day wore on with no sign of Wade. "He said 3 days," Madeline replied, not moving from her post. "This is the 3rd day, and it's only noon," Kate reminded her. "Give him time." Madeline nodded, though anxiety continued to gnaw at her. The journey to Silver City had been uneventful, a blessing after their harrowing escape. The train had delivered them to Denver, where they had stayed one night before catching a stagecoach south. Kate had sent telegrams to several trusted friends, trying to get news of what had happened after their departure, but so far, they had heard nothing. "What if something's happened to him?" Madeline asked, voicing the fear that had haunted her since they parted. "What if the Pharaohs don't borrow trouble?" Kate interrupted firmly. "Wade's been in tight spots before. He knows how to handle himself." Madeline returned to her vigil, unable to settle to any other activity. Over the past 3 days, she had found her thoughts constantly returning to Wade, his quiet strength, the gentleness behind his tough exterior, the way his rare smile transformed his face. She had known him for less than a week, yet somehow he had become vitally important to her. When Kate suggested they go down for lunch, Madeline refused, unwilling to leave her post even briefly. Kate sighed but didn't argue, ordering food sent up to their room instead. Madeline ate mechanically, her attention never leaving the street below. The afternoon stretched endlessly. People came and went on the busy street: cowboys, businessmen, ladies in fashionable dresses, children running errands. None of them was Wade. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street, Madeline's hope began to fade. "He's not coming," she said softly. Kate set aside her mending and came to stand beside her at the window. "The day's not over yet," she said, though her own voice held less conviction than before. They were still standing there when the door to their room burst open. Both women whirled around, Kate reaching for the derringer she kept in her pocket. But it was Daniel who stood in the doorway, dusty from travel but very much alive. "Daniel," Kate cried, crossing the room in 3 strides and throwing herself into her husband's arms. He caught her, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. Madeline watched their reunion with a mixture of joy and mounting dread. Daniel had come alone. When the couple finally separated, Daniel looked past his wife to where Madeline stood, frozen by the window. The expression on his face confirmed her worst fears. "Wade?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Daniel's weathered face was grave. "He's alive," he said, answering her most immediate concern. "But he's hurt. Bad." Madeline's knees weakened and she gripped the windowsill for support. "Where is he?" "Downstairs," Daniel replied. "Doc's with him now." "What happened?" Kate demanded, leading her husband to a chair and pouring him a glass of water from the pitcher on the side table. Daniel drank deeply before answering. "The Pharaohs tracked him into the high country. He led them a hell of a chase, pardon my language, Miss Vance, but they caught up to him near the old Carson mine. 3 against 1. He shook his head grimly. "Wyatt Pharaoh's dead. Wade shot him when he tried to take him alive. The other 2 got away, but not before one of them put a bullet in Wade's side." "How bad?" Kate asked, her practical nature asserting itself. "Bad enough," Daniel replied. "He lost a lot of blood before I found him. Been riding with him for 2 days, trying to keep him in the saddle." He looked at Madeline. "He was determined to get here. Wouldn't let me take him to the closer doctor in Dry Creek." Without another word, Madeline headed for the door. Kate called after her, but she didn't stop. She descended the stairs quickly, looking for any sign of where Wade might be. A clerk at the front desk, directed her to a room at the back of the hotel where the doctor had been taken. She found the room easily enough a small chamber that appeared to serve as the hotel's office when needed. The door was closed, but she could hear muffled voices within. Without hesitation, she knocked. The door was opened by a balding man with spectacles and a harried expression. "Yes," he asked impatiently. "I'm here to see Wade Zimmerman," Madeline said, trying to peer past him into the room. The doctor frowned. "Are you family?" "Yes," she lied without hesitation. "I'm his wife." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "He's resting now, Mrs. Zimmerman. I've removed the bullet and stitched the wound, but he's very weak. He'll need careful nursing and complete rest for at least 2 weeks. May I see him?" Madeline asked, her heart racing at the thought that Wade was just beyond that door. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, he conceded. "But don't disturb him if he's sleeping. His body needs rest to heal." He stepped aside, allowing Madeline to enter the room. It was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn across the single window. A bed stood against one wall, and on it lay Wade, his face pale against the white pillowcase. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, a bandage visible where the sheet had slipped down to reveal his bare torso. Madeline approached quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. In sleep, the lines of tension that usually marked his features were smoothed away, making him look younger and more vulnerable. A dark bruise spread across one cheekbone, and a cut above his eye had been stitched closed. She sank into the chair beside the bed, her hand hovering uncertainly before gently covering his where it lay on the sheet. His skin was warm, too warm, suggesting fever, but the steady pulse she felt beneath her fingers reassured her. "You came back," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Just like you promised." The doctor cleared his throat from the doorway. "I've left instructions with the hotel staff," he said. "I'll return in the morning to check on him. If his fever rises or the wound shows signs of infection, send for me immediately." Madeline nodded, not taking her eyes from Wade's face. "I'll stay with him," she said, her tone making it clear this was not open to negotiation. The doctor seemed about to object, then thought better of it. "Very well," he said, "but remember what I said about rest." After he left, Madeline continued her vigil at Wade's bedside. Kate and Daniel came down shortly thereafter, bringing her belongings and offering to take turns sitting with Wade. Madeline refused, insisting that she needed to be there when he woke. "At least let me bring you some dinner," Kate said, "and you should change into something more comfortable if you're planning to stay all night." Madeline conceded these points, allowing Kate to help her change into a simple cotton dress while Daniel stepped outside. She ate the meal they brought, though she scarcely tasted it, her attention focused on Wade's every breath, every small movement. As night fell, Daniel and Kate reluctantly returned to their own room, extracting a promise from Madeline that she would call them if there was any change. Left alone with Wade, Madeline settled more comfortably in her chair, preparing for a long night. The hours passed slowly. Twice, she dampened a cloth with cool water and gently bathed Wade's face and neck, trying to ease his fever. Once he stirred, murmuring something she couldn't catch, his hand twitching beneath hers. But he didn't wake, and eventually, despite her determination to stay alert, Madeline dozed off, her head resting on the edge of the bed. She woke to the sensation of fingers lightly touching her hair. Opening her eyes, she found Wade watching her, his blue eyes clear despite the pain evident in his expression. "Madeline," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're awake," she breathed, sitting up quickly. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," he replied, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before fading into a grimace of pain. "Let me get you some water," she said, reaching for the pitcher on the bedside table. She helped him raise his head enough to drink, acutely aware of his weakness. "How long have I been here?" he asked when he had settled back against the pillows. "Since yesterday evening," Madeline replied. "Daniel brought you. The doctor removed the bullet." Wade nodded slightly. "Daniel found me after, didn't think I'd make it this far." "But you did," Madeline said, unable to keep the emotion from her voice. "You kept your promise." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Couldn't leave you wondering," he said simply. "Not after everything." Something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, sent a warmth spreading through Madeline that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Before she could respond, however, Wade's eyes drifted closed again, exhaustion claiming him. "Rest," she whispered, squeezing his hand gently. "I'll be here when you wake." Over the next few days, Wade's condition gradually improved. The fever broke on the second night, and by the fourth day, he was able to sit up for short periods and take light meals. The doctor, pleased with his progress, reduced his visits to once a day, though he continued to warn against overexertion. Madeline rarely left Wade's side, reading to him when he was awake, watching over him when he slept. Kate brought her meals and fresh clothes, and Daniel kept them informed of news from the outside world. Pierce, Vance, and Thornton had apparently given up their immediate pursuit, though Daniel warned they were unlikely to forget the matter entirely. "Thornton's put the word out that he's still looking for his runaway bride," Daniel reported. "But with Wyatt Farrow dead and his brothers licking their wounds, there's not much immediate threat." "What about the ranch?" Wade asked, his voice stronger now though still lacking its usual vigor. Daniel's expression was grim. "They burned the barn and broke up some fencing," he admitted. "But the main house is intact and most of the cattle were in the north pasture. Could have been worse." Wade nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll rebuild," he said firmly. "Yes, we will," Daniel agreed. "But not until you're well enough to travel." As Wade's strength returned, Madeline found herself both looking forward to and dreading the conversations that were now possible between them. During his worst days, she had allowed herself to imagine a future where she remained by his side, perhaps even as more than just someone under his protection. But now, with the immediate danger past, she wasn't sure what place she had in his life or if he wanted her to have one at all. On the 7th day after their arrival in Silver City, Wade was well enough to sit in a chair by the window, watching the street below while Madeline read to him from a book of Western tales she had purchased from a shop down the street. When she finished a particularly colorful story about a stagecoach robbery, Wade turned from the window to look at her directly. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said, his voice gentle but serious. Madeline closed the book, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes," she agreed. "I suppose we do. You're safe now," Wade said. "Thornton and your uncle are hundreds of miles away, and while they might still hold a grudge, they're unlikely to pursue you this far." "That's good," Madeline said cautiously, unsure where this was leading. "You have options," Wade continued. "Silver City is a decent town. You could find work here, maybe as a school teacher or in one of the shops. Or you could continue East Denver, Chicago, even New York. Start fresh where no one knows your history." Madeline studied his face, trying to discern what he wanted her to say. His expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "And what about you?" she asked. "What will you do?" "When I'm well enough, I'll go back to the Circle Z," he replied. "Rebuild what was lost. It's my home." "I see," Madeline said, a hollow feeling spreading through her chest. He was giving her an honorable way out, fulfilling his promise to protect her, then setting her free to choose her own path. It was more than fair, more than generous. So why did it feel like her heart was breaking? "Unless," Wade added, his voice dropping slightly, "you wanted to come back with me." Madeline's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his. "To the ranch?" Wade nodded, a hint of vulnerability showing through his composed exterior. "It wouldn't be easy," he warned. "Ranching is hard work, and there's always the chance that Thornton or your uncle might come looking again someday." "Are you offering me a job?" Madeline asked, needing clarity, needing to know exactly what he was proposing. Wade held her gaze steadily. "I'm offering you a home," he said, "and, if you were interested, something more, something more." Madeline repeated, hardly daring to hope she understood his meaning. Wade shifted in his chair, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wound. "I know we haven't known each other long," he said, "and I'm not asking for promises right now, just a chance. To see if what I feel for you might be something you could feel for me too." The careful words, so unlike the confident way Wade usually spoke, told Madeline more than a flowery declaration ever could. This was a man unused to revealing his heart, yet here he was, offering it to her with simple honesty. "I already do," she said softly. "Feel something for you, I mean." The tension in Wade's shoulders eased visibly. "So you'll come back to the Circle Z?" Yes, Madeline said, a smile spreading across her face. Though I should warn you, I know next to nothing about cattle ranching. You'll learn, Wade said, returning her smile with one of his own rare and all the more precious for it. And I imagine you'll teach us a few things too. In that moment, looking at the man who had risked everything to protect her, Madeline knew she had found not just safety, but a future filled with possibility. Whatever challenges lay ahead rebuilding the ranch, the potential threat from Thornton and her uncle, the adjustments of two independent people learning to build a life together, they would face them as they had faced the dangers of their flight, side by side. 2 months later, Madeline stood on the porch of the rebuilt barn at the Circle Z, watching as Wade worked with a young colt in the corral. His wound had healed well, though the doctor had warned he would always carry the scar and might experience occasional pain in cold weather. It hadn't slowed him down, if anything. The experience seemed to have made him more determined to restore and improve the ranch. The past weeks had been busy ones. Upon their return, they had found the damage to the ranch less severe than feared, but still requiring significant work. The main house had been untouched, but the barn had been reduced to charred timbers, and several sections of fencing had been deliberately destroyed. With Daniel, Kate, and the ranch hands, they had set about rebuilding, working from dawn to dusk. Madeline had thrown herself into ranch life with determination, learning quickly and finding satisfaction in physical labor after years of constrained existence at her uncle's house. Kate had proven an excellent teacher, showing her how to manage the household, preserve food for the winter, and even assist with calving when necessary. Wade and Daniel had taught her to ride properly, handle a rifle with confidence, and understand the complex ecosystem of the ranch. In the evenings, exhausted but content, they would gather around the table in the main house, sharing meals and stories. Sometimes Wade would play the harmonica, a talent Madeline had been surprised to discover, while Daniel recounted tales from their early days at the Circle Z. Those quiet moments, surrounded by people who had become her family, were when Madeline felt most certain she had made the right choice. And then there were the moments with Wade alone. Walks at sunset along the ridge behind the house. Quiet conversations on the porch after the others had gone to bed. The first tentative kiss, 3 weeks after their return, that had left them both breathless and smiling. The growing closeness between them, built on mutual respect and deepening affection. Now, watching him in the corral, Madeline marveled at how natural it felt to be here, as if this had always been her home. The sound of hoofbeats on the approach road drew her attention. Shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, she recognized Sheriff Taylor from the nearest town, riding toward the house at an unhurried pace. Wade noticed the visitor too, giving a final pat to the colt before exiting the corral. He joined Madeline on the porch just as the sheriff reached the yard. "Afternoon, Wade, Miss Vance," Sheriff Taylor said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Sheriff," Wade acknowledged. "What brings you out this way?" "News I thought you'd want to hear," the sheriff replied, dismounting. "Silas Thornton's dead." Madeline's breath caught in her throat. "Dead?" she repeated. "How?" "Heart gave out, according to the telegram I received," Sheriff Taylor said. "Happened 3 days ago at his home in Bitter Creek." Wade's hand found Madeline's, squeezing gently in silent support. "And the bounty he placed?" he asked. "Withdrawn," the sheriff confirmed. "His son's taking over the business interests, and from what I hear, he has no interest in pursuing his father's personal matters." The relief that washed over Madeline was so profound she felt momentarily light-headed. Thornton's death didn't guarantee her uncle would abandon his grudge, but without the mining magnate's resources behind him, Pierce Vance was far less of a threat. "Thank you for bringing us the news," Wade said, his voice steady though Madeline could feel the tension in his hand. Sheriff Taylor nodded. "Thought you should know, things should be quieter around here now." He tipped his hat again. "I'll be on my way, got rounds to make before dark." They watched him ride away, neither speaking until he had disappeared from view. Then Wade turned to Madeline, his blue eyes searching her face. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. Madeline considered the question. "Relieved," she admitted. "Not happy about a man's death, but relieved that the shadow over us has lifted somewhat." Wade nodded, understanding in his expression. It changes things, he said. You have more options now. If you wanted to go back, claim your inheritance. Is that what you want? Madeline asked, her heart suddenly pounding. For me to go back? No, Wade said immediately, his hand tightening on hers. That's not what I want at all, but I need you to know that you have choices, that you're not staying here because you have nowhere else to go. Madeline stepped closer, resting her free hand against his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. I'm exactly where I want to be, she said softly. Where I choose to be. The smile that transformed Wade's face was worth every hardship they had endured. He bent his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, he kept her close, his arms encircling her waist. In that case, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that Madeline had rarely heard, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Yes, she prompted when he hesitated. Wade took a deep breath. I know it hasn't been long, he began, and I'd understand if you wanted to wait, but I love you, Madeline Vance. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you standing on that road, defying your uncle despite the odds against you. Madeline's heart soared at the words she had hoped to hear, but hadn't dared expect so soon. I love you too, she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her. Wade's smile deepened. Then would you consider becoming my wife, making the Circle Z truly your home, not just a place you're staying? Yes, Madeline said without hesitation. Yes, I will. The kiss that followed sealed their promise to each other, a promise born in danger but flourishing in peace, founded on protection but growing into partnership. As the setting sun bathed the ranch in golden light, Madeline knew that the journey that had begun with her desperate flight from one marriage had led her, by paths she could never have predicted, to another that she embraced with her whole heart. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Madeline Vance became Madeline Zimmerman in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Kate had decorated the main house with wildflowers and ribbons, and neighbors from miles around had gathered to celebrate. Sheriff Taylor performed the ceremony, his official capacity lending legal weight to the proceedings. Madeline wore a dress of pale blue silk that Kate had helped her sew, with a crown of white blossoms in her hair. Wade, uncharacteristically nervous, had appeared in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. When he saw Madeline walking toward him on Daniel's arm, the look of wonder and love in his eyes was all the affirmation she needed that this day, this choice, was right. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken clearly for all to hear. Wade's voice, normally so steady, faltered slightly as he promised to love, honor, and protect her all the days of his life. Madeline's own voice remained strong as she made the same promises in return, her eyes never leaving his. When Sheriff Taylor pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests startled birds from the nearby trees. Wade swept Madeline into a kiss that was perhaps a bit more passionate than strictly proper for the occasion, drawing good-natured laughter and a few whistles from the crowd. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by neighbors and prepared by Kate and Alina. A fiddler from town provided music for dancing, and someone had brought a jug of particularly potent moonshine that ensured the festivities grew increasingly lively as the evening progressed. In a quiet moment between dances, Wade led Madeline away from the noise and lights, down the path to the ridge where they often walked in the evenings. The moon was rising, casting silver light across the landscape that was now truly her home. Happy? Wade asked, his arm around her waist. Completely, Madeline replied, leaning into his embrace. I never imagined when I ran from that wedding that I would end up here, that something so good could come from such a desperate moment. Wade was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant mountains. I've been thinking about that day, he said finally, about why I stopped when I saw you surrounded by your uncle and his men. Because of your sister, Madeline said softly, remembering what he had told her. Partly, Wade acknowledged, but it was more than that. It was you, the way you stood there, outnumbered but not defeated. I saw something in you that I recognized. He turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face with gentle reverence. Courage, determination, a refusal to be broken by circumstances. Madeline placed her hands over his, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling in his voice. "We saved each other," she said simply. Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And we'll keep doing that every day for the rest of our lives." As they sealed this new promise with a kiss, the sounds of celebration drifting up from the ranch below, Madeline knew that the words Wade had spoken on that dusty road, "She's under my protection now," had been not just a moment of gallantry, but the beginning of a bond that would sustain them through whatever the future held. A bond of love, trust, and mutual protection, forged in the wild heart of the West and strong enough to last a lifetime.